New moms and dads are often asked, when did your baby take their first step? Now, maybe you've experienced this differently, but for our boys, there's always this crawl stage, which is immediately followed by a wobbly fall down and then get back up stage. It's never pretty, because there is this desire in this stage, there's just not much ability. And so every evening in our house right now, our family is gathering around our 7-month-old little boy like he's a campfire. My two oldest boys, who are 5 and 3, they would rather watch their little brother try to walk than watch a Pixar movie. And then their grandparents, they've been checking in every single night, not to ask how we're doing, but to ask how the walking progress is going. So why all this attention on our 7-month-old? Because he has the desire to move, but he doesn't yet have the ability. And we all know he's going to get there eventually. Now, maybe you've seen this with your own kids, your grandkids, nieces, or nephews. There is something in the human spirit that longs to move even before the body can. Which is why I have a lot of false start videos on my phone of my son. Videos of what I thought would be his first steps, but what just turned out to be the 100th fall. But eventually, the work is going to pay off. I know it will, because I've seen it with my first two. Eventually, there will be steps. And so we're starting a new series called Forward Motion, where we're going to look at the steps we take as we move through life. And often, when it comes to our faith, I bet we look a lot like a toddler learning to walk. There's a desire to move forward, to grow closer to God, or to make better choices, but getting there sometimes seems longer than we'd hoped. And if we're really honest, we may even say that we wish we could experience change overnight, that we could arrive at the destination instantly. But I think we've all noticed that when it comes to making changes in our lives for the better, overnight success is rare. And maybe you want to grow or change when it comes to your job, or maybe you just want to grow the retirement fund as you see the day approaching, or maybe you just want to be in better health physically or to keep a better diet. But I think for many of us, this tension, it shows up spiritually. Like maybe you've just started coming to church and you hear people talking about life change. You hear how God totally changed someone's story. But how does that actually happen? Or maybe you've been a Christian for a long time, but honestly, you feel like you've just kind of stopped growing. Like somewhere along the way, you just stalled out. So whatever it is for you, I think we all feel the same frustration. From toddlers to senior adults, we have the desire to change, but we don't have the ability to change at the pace we want. We know who we want to become, and sometimes we even feel guilty for not becoming it, but we can't seem to get where we want to be fast enough. And we may have even been angry with ourselves and maybe even angry with other people for not getting there, wherever there is, fast enough. And maybe even for some of us, we wonder if God is mad at us for not being where we should be by now. And so the question is, what do we do about it? How fast should our faith grow? And how quickly should we see results? And so the truth is, we aren't the first people to ever follow God and feel a little bit slow and get a little bit lost. And that's why we're going to spend the next few weeks talking about the steps we take in our faith journey by looking at the story of the people of Israel as they journey to the Promised Land. So along the way to the Promised Land, the children of Israel received the 10 Commandments. And I bet all of us, to some degree or another, are familiar with the 10 Commandments. We probably can't quote all of them, but we know the Bible had some helpful things to say about how we behave. And you don't even have to be a Christian to think that most of these commandments are a good idea. So let's look at 3 of the commandments together. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And here's another one. You shall not murder. And then one more. You shall not commit adultery. So let's look at that first commandment. In the first commandment, God said, don't worship things that don't exist, which seems really simple. It's as if in his opening speech to his nation, God was saying, we will move on to other things eventually, but for now, let's start simple, people. Don't worship non-existent things. And then a few verses later, God said, don't kill people. Now, sometimes the 10 Commandments are like the signs you see at the zoo that say, don't jump in the cage. So the sign is there because it's been a problem. Someone has done this, even though it should seem obvious that it's not a good idea. And the same is true with these commands. God just started with the basics. Stop killing. And then one verse later, God said, don't sleep with someone you aren't married to. Again, there's no follow-up statement. He didn't go on to add 10 keys to a great marriage. And so when I look at this list, it's obvious these are some good guidelines for living. They aren't bad points, but they're beginning points. In fact, I think we could argue that following these rules, Christian or not, would make your life better, and it would make your life story better. And here's what I mean. This story was taking place in the middle of the desert where God was meeting a group of newly freed slaves. Remember, they had no law. They had no understanding of what being a free human being was. And so at this point, they've been working 365 days a year making bricks and potentially being beaten to death if they didn't make enough to satisfy the governing Pharaoh in Egypt. Murder was a way of life. But we read the Ten Commandments differently because we read them from where we sit now in a civilized modern society. We know this stuff, but these people, straight out of captivity, didn't know this stuff. God met them where they were, and He invited them to take a step towards a better life. Why? Because that's how God works all throughout the Bible. What's true for a toddler, it's true for us. You have to crawl before you can walk. It's going to take time. Just focus on the next step. If you get that down, then you can take the next step. Don't focus on how far you have to go. Focus on putting one foot in front of the other. Let's just start with no killing. But we're not going to stay there. But we're going to start there because it's a step. So is being a person who follows the Ten Commandments the pinnacle of what God wants for His people? No. I mean, of course not. Because a few thousand years later, Jesus came and said things like, "You have heard that it was said, but I'm telling you." See, when Jesus came, He didn't dismiss the Ten Commandments, but instead He expounded on their true meaning a step further. I mean, Jesus is the absolute best picture of God we could ever have. He is God in a body, and for Him, the Ten Commandments are good, but they aren't the full picture. So notice a few examples of the teachings in the New Testament. So when Jesus was asked what the most important commandment was, He began by talking about our relationship with God. And He actually highlighted another command God had given to His people, a command that went a step beyond the first commandment issued in Exodus, the don't worship non-existent things one. So this is what Jesus said. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all of your soul and with all your mind." So in other words, He was saying there's more to following God than just not worshiping non-existent idols. Let's begin to worship the God who is actually there with all of our hearts. And so when it comes to how we relate to other people, Jesus went a step beyond do not murder. He said, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." So in other words, Jesus was saying, it's great not to kill someone, but God's vision for friendship is more than just not taking their life. It's when we're willing to lose our life for someone else that we experience great love. And when it comes to marriage, the Apostle Paul revealed even more of God's heart for marriage by going a step beyond simply don't commit adultery. He said this, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her." So in other words, God was saying, that is great that you're not sleeping around. Now let's begin to love the spouse that you have. And that loving, it looks a lot like sacrifice. See, sometimes it's tempting to want to skip over the Old Testament. It seems ancient and confusing and not relatable today. I mean, I totally get that. But the Old Testament is a gracious reminder of a God who meets people right where they are. The voice of God finds people in strange and desperate places and invites them to take one step, to start where they are. Look, forward motion with your faith, it always happens in steps, not leaps. So if we read the Exodus story just side by side with the Jesus stories, we can forget that roughly 1,500 years separate the two. Like God revealed Himself slowly to His people, and He's still doing so today. At the beginning of Israel's journey with Him, behavior modification was how God showed His heart to them. I mean, it was a way that they could understand. Don't worship other gods. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. But when Jesus came and showed that God's plan for our story is so much more than just not killing and not committing adultery, it's a whole life story of loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves. God didn't expect His people to grasp all of that right away or to live all of it out. God is fine with slow growth. And that just simply means this, that God is more patient with us than we are with ourselves. Like, I get angry that I continue to make the same mistake. My self-esteem deflates with every failed attempt to pray more, or to be a better father, or be a better husband, or a better friend, or to trend towards healthy in any direction. But it's possible. My frustration is from trying to take a leap, to be perfect, when all God is asking me to do is take a step. And as Christians, we don't always do a very good job with this. Like, I notice this a ton in church circles. We beat up on one another. We make each other feel guilty for not taking leaps. We compare ourselves to someone who is further along than we are. We do this financially, we do it spiritually, we do it relationally, and we do it in any area of life that gives us an opportunity to compare. We think our standard of success is where someone else is on the journey. It's just human nature to evaluate success in terms of other people. But God doesn't evaluate our success that way. Like, I may have a hard time being patient with myself for a day, but God is patient with his people for centuries. There's a man in my church, and he sits on the front row of the 8:30 service every single week. And he's been coming for a few months, and he's in his late 60s. He's finally at the point where he can consider that God might be real. And now, is he a Christian yet? No, but he's taking a step. And just so he knows the importance of steps, I make sure I give him a hug every week and remind him of his courage. And there's this girl who's also in our church who doesn't feel like she's a very good Christian. And she's been in and out of rehab. She can't keep a relationship, and she hates herself for it. But she keeps coming back. Just 2 steps forward, and then she takes 3 steps back. But rather than getting frustrated, we celebrate the steps. Like, I wonder, what might it look like if we approached each other and ourselves the way a parent approaches a toddler who is just making the effort to walk without them ever really going anywhere? See, as parents, we approach those toddlers with patience and with hopeful anticipation. We don't have to make ourselves do this. It just comes naturally. We applaud 3 seconds of stability, even when it ends in a crash and in tears. What if we did that with ourselves and with each other? Like, what if, instead of pointing out how far we have to go, we were patient and hopeful with the steps that we're taking? So what about you? Like, what area has your patience worn out with yourself? I mean, has the inner voice in your head shamed you into believing you're never going to change? I mean, maybe your eyes have been set on how far you have to go and not on the step that's right in front of you. So what if in your church and in your own heart, you decided to use a different approach? If God is so patient with us, I mean, could you imagine what would happen if we became patient with ourselves and with those around us? I mean, how differently would we think about our lack of change and our failure? Like, how differently would we handle those around us if they don't change fast enough or continue to fall? Look, for many of us, we need to decide what the next step is, the next step that we need to take. Steps forward may seem unknown and they may seem scary. Change even may seem impossible. But the beginning of any truly difficult journey, it always is going to seem impossible. Like, we may not be able to get there tomorrow, but we can all get there one step at a time. And the step is going to be different for each and every one of us. But God is inviting us to simply put one foot in front of the other, to start where you are. Because forward motion with your faith, it happens in steps, not leaps.